A 46-year-old man sits in a cardiology clinic with one hand pressed against his chest. He's been to the ER multiple times in the past few weeks. Walking just a few steps give him unbelievable chest pain and makes him so out of breath that it points to possible congestive heart failure. 2 years ago, this problem did not exist at all. He worked. He raised his 2 daughters. His chest never once stopped him from living a normal life. Now, twice in recent months, the pain in his chest has struck hard enough that doctors suspected the worst. Both times, they drew his blood and checked a marker called troponin, the protein released when heart muscle is dying. Both times, it came back elevated. But this man is not having a heart attack, not the kind anyone in that room is expecting anyway. Something else is happening inside his body, and it is not hiding in his arteries. By the end of this story, a diagnosis surfaces that connects his failing heart, his fading hearing, and 15 years of what everyone assumed was ordinary diabetes, into a single rare disease that had been quietly rewriting the rules of his body since the day he was born. This is Mendel Science. Please like and subscribe. Now enjoy the story. The backstory. Let's go back to the beginning. 15 years before he ever sat in that clinic, this man was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. He would have been around 31 years old at the time. Nobody thought much of it. Type 2 diabetes is common, and doctors started him on the usual treatments to manage his blood sugar. For over a decade, that was the entirety of his medical history. He never smoked. He never drank. There was no family history of heart disease anywhere that anyone knew of. He got married, had 2 daughters, and lived a completely ordinary life. Nothing about his day-to-day life suggested that a clock was quietly running within him. He was just a man managing his diabetes, the same as millions of people around the world do every day. Then, 2 years before everything changed, he began to notice tightness in his chest during exertion, climbing stairs, walking quickly. It seemed minor at first, easy to explain away. He was over 40, and he was diabetic. A little chest tightness during physical effort did not feel like an emergency, but it never faded. Instead, month after month, worsened. About a year after his chest first started bothering him, something else changed. His hearing in both ears began to fade, slowly, quietly. Hearing loss is not something most people connect to heart problems or diabetes. Conversations grew harder to follow. He found himself asking people to repeat themselves over and over again. At the time, it seemed like its own separate issue, maybe just an unlucky part of turning 46. Nobody linked it yet to the bigger picture this man had. Then, 6 months before his annual clinic visit, everything sped up. Chest tightness that used to appear only during real exercise now showed up during ordinary movement. Walking across a room, getting out of a car. He developed breathlessness so severe that just walking left him fighting for air. Then twice. The pain sharpened enough that his heart appeared to be failing. Both times his troponin came back elevated alongside another marker called NT-proBNP, which rises when the heart is under strain. And yet when he was finally examined at the clinic, his vital signs looked almost unremarkable. Blood pressure was 102/66. Pulse 77, steady and regular. No swelling in his legs, no abnormal sounds in his heart or lungs. On the outside, a stable-looking man. Underneath, something had been quietly damaging his heart for years, and it was accelerating. With chest pain and an elevated troponin, the first and most obvious fear was a heart attack caused by a blocked artery. Doctors performed a coronary angiogram, threading a catheter through his blood vessels to search for narrowing or blockages. They found nothing. His coronary arteries were clear. So they looked closer at the heart muscle itself. An echocardiogram showed the wall of his left ventricle, the heart's main pumping chamber, had thickened to about 16 millimeters. A healthy wall usually sits at around 10 or 11. A thickened heart wall like this, with no blocked artery to explain it, often points toward one particular and serious disease, amyloidosis, a disorder characterized by abnormal proteins damaging heart muscle and stiffening it from within. Doctors tested his blood for the abnormal proteins that cause it, a a simple test that would hold this man's fate. But after just a few hours, nothing. The test was negative. Before this all began, everyone involved, including the patient himself, had operated on the assumption that his only chronic illness was ordinary type 2 diabetes. He had spent that entire time on diabetes medication, plus a cholesterol controller. For most people, these drugs are completely safe. They are prescribed to millions of patients every single year without incident. But for some, these medications can put strain on an already empty system. Nobody yet suspected that this man's own long-term treatment might have quietly been working against him the whole time. A heart attack, ruled out. Amyloidosis, ruled out. 2 major diagnoses were considered and eliminated within weeks of each other. And still, his chest tightness kept getting worse and his hearing kept fading. Whatever this was, it was accelerating, and nobody could yet put a name to it. The diagnosis. The turning point came when doctors stopped looking only at his heart and started looking at the pattern across his entire body. A cardiac MRI showed an abnormal signal in the front wall of his heart that did not line up with the territory of any single blood vessel, meaning it likely was not caused by blocked blood flow at all. Around the same time, doctors ran a lactate test, drawing his blood before and after light exercise. Before exercise, his lactate already sat at 3.5 above the normal range. Immediately after mild exertion, it spiked to 9.25, more than 4 times what it should be. 10 minutes later, it was still sitting close to 7. Then came a brain MRI. He had never had a stroke. No sudden weakness, no slurred speech, nothing that had ever sent him to an emergency room for his brain. And yet the scan revealed small, scattered patches of damage, tiny, silent injuries that had happened at some point without him ever feeling them occur. A heart that thickens with no blockage, hearing that fades for no clear reason. Diabetes that struck unusually early in life. Lactate that spikes abnormally with exertion. A brain quietly collecting damage the patient never felt. Individually, none of it meant much. Together, it pointed towards something doctors rarely encounter. A disease of the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. Nearly every organ that had been affected, the heart, the ears, the brain, depends on a steady, uninterrupted supply of mitochondrial energy. When the production line breaks down, it does not fail everywhere at once or at the same speed. Some cells end up with more damaged mitochondria than others. That uneven damage is part of why this disease can look so different from one patient to the next, even within the same family, and why it had been so easy to miss for 15 years. To confirm it, doctors took a small sample of muscle tissue from his calf. Under the microscope, the fibers told the story immediately. Fragmented, disorganized muscle fibers. A distinctive pattern under special staining known as ragged red fibers, a classic fingerprint of mitochondrial disease. Electron microscopy showed the mitochondria themselves were swollen and damaged, struggling to do the one job they exist to do, which is keeping the body powered. Then the definitive. A genetic test was ordered, and a mutation at one specific point on his mitochondrial DNA, in a gene called MT-TL1 was found. MT-TL1, also known as M.3243A to G, was present in about 14% of the mitochondrial DNA in his blood sample. The diagnosis: MELAS syndrome, mitochondrial encephalomyopathy, lactic acidosis, and stroke-like episodes. Most people with MELAS eventually experience the disease's namesake stroke-like episodes, along with seizures and severe headaches, in more than 90% of documented cases. This man had none of that. His body expressed the disease almost entirely through his heart, his ears, and his blood sugar instead, which is part of why it took 15 years to finally uncover what was actually happening. Doctors also tested his extended family. His 2 daughters carried none of the mutation, which made sense once doctors explained something crucial. Mitochondrial DNA passes down only through mothers. Because he is male, he could never have passed this disease to his own children, no matter what. But 2 of his nephews, through his mother's side of the family, carried the exact same mutation. Neither of them had any symptoms. Not yet, anyway. treatment and road ahead. There is no cure for MELAS. What doctors can do is try to slow it down and ease the burden it places on the body. His diabetes treatment was adjusted, shifting him toward newer medications, less likely to add stress to his mitochondria. He was sent home with instructions to monitor his blood sugar closely and follow up as needed. That meant regular blood work, regular check-ins with his cardiology and endocrinology teams, and close attention to any new symptom that might signal his heart, or his hearing was slipping again. 4 months later, when doctors checked in on him by phone, the update was encouraging. Both his chest discomfort and his hearing had improved. It is not a cure. MELAS is a chronic, progressive disease, and in the most severe cases, patients can eventually need a heart transplant once the damage becomes too extensive. But for now, this man was breathing easier, hearing more clearly, and finally living with a name attached to what had been quietly reshaping his body for over a decade. Closing remarks. What makes this case so unsettling is not only the disease itself, but how long it managed to hide in plain sight. For 15 years, a rare genetic condition disguised itself as something painfully ordinary, adult onset diabetes. However, over time, it quietly reached into his heart, his ears, and his brain. It took a clean angiogram, 2 negative amyloidosis tests, a small piece of muscle from his calf, and a single letter change in his mitochondrial DNA to finally reveal what had been there the entire time. MELAS does not follow one script. It can attack the brain in one patient and barely touch it in another, while quietly going after the heart instead. Cases like this are a reminder that when a handful of seemingly unrelated symptoms keep showing up together, the real answer is sometimes not hiding in any single organ, but in the machinery every cell in the body depends on just to keep running. This is Mendel Science. When the body is a mystery, read the genes. Subscribe and like for more genetic mysteries. Please comment any suggestions for the future of this channel.